What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another edition of the Sheehan Show here on Sherdog.com. My name is Sean Sheehan. I'm delighted to be joined today by Brad Wharton before Cage Warriors 174, which goes down on July 20th, 2024 over in Indigo at the O2 in London. And Brad, I was only talking the other day, I did a bit of a podcast, and I said, geez, it's been a while since we've seen Cage Warriors. We need a bit of Cage Warriors back. And very quickly here in the next 2 weeks, we'll have another preview, obviously, next week. But two cards in the space of, 5 days, I think? But it's great to see Cage Warriors back, especially the big London card. It must be great for you to be back with a bang here after a bit of time off.
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously, our most recent show was the beginning of June. So we've had a little bit of a break. And, that show was over in the US. So it kind of feels a bit different anyway. It's almost like you're on holiday a little bit, living in a casino for a week. Not that we're not all working extremely hard.
Of course,
like to stress that. But yeah, no, it's great to be back at the Indigo. Always a fantastic venue, and of course Manchester a few days after, just ahead of the UFC, and of course the prize fighter as well. So it's another unique thing being added to the mix. That's going to be an interesting week. Can't wait.
I wanted to start off with that prize fighter. Can you just explain to people the prize fighter, how it works, how it's going down, and so it's happening on the London card?
Yeah, so it's going to be on July 20th. There will be semi-finals and a reserve bout, which will take place during the prelims, and then the final will be later that same evening, which will be the main event of the card. So just to give the guys enough time they're going to have a full medical, of course, after the first fight, make sure they pass that. And then, just a bit of time to, have a breather. Obviously, you don't want to leave them too long in case they stiffen up and the adrenaline wears off too much and they start hurting again. So yeah, it's a fine science planning it all. But essentially it was a completely blind draw. So we had all the participants' names drawn out of a bag. So the matchups were completely random. As we'll talk about in a minute, the guy who's probably arguably the favorite, Martin Yoni, is in the reserve bout. So it was a completely random thing, which was really exciting. Obviously, Martin Yoni not too happy about being a reserve, but if past tournaments have taught us anything, especially one night tournaments, he's got as good a chance of anyone as walking away with that 50 bags.
And as you said, they're 50 bags, 50,000 for the winner, which, it's, I know there's a few promotions at the moment throwing a lot of money out there, but for a promotion that's been around for a long while and runs away Cage Warriors do, to throw 50,000 out there is amazing. But just on the one night tournament itself, when you get to the fights, I know you're a big fan of old school MMA, but I think stuff like this is, it could be done a little bit more, and make it a little bit fun, and not even necessarily one night tournaments, but just little things to make MMA a little bit different, make the promotion and make the card a little bit different. And I'm sure you agree as well. Is this something that you've always kind of wanted to call, always wanted to be part of a one night tournament? Because and maybe you could have some stresses in calling it too, because one fight could be cancelled in the middle of another fight and everything like that, which is, I'm sure, very tough, something to hear in your ear in the middle of a fight. But I'm sure you're looking forward to it. Is this always something you kind of dreamed of being part of?
Yeah, I love tournaments, man. I think most people who got into the sport around the time that I did will probably have quite a nostalgic fondness for them. And I've been lucky to have been a part of a few tournaments, both with Cage Warriors and on the amateur scene. There's nothing quite like the excitement, because you genuinely don't know what's going to happen. You could have a guy that is by far and away the favorite guy in the tournament, and he picks up an injury. It could be a broken hand, or he gets cut too badly, and all of a sudden everything goes up in the air. Now, I think with previous tournaments that we've had the tournament participants, and then there's been a reserve bout matched outside of it. Whereas with this time, the difference is all 6 guys were guys that we felt were ready to be in that tournament straight away. And as we said, Martin Yoni and Giordano, for those guys to be in the reserve bout, it just kind of shows you how stacked this bracket is. And whereas in the past you might say, oh well, it's a reserve guy coming in, he might not be up to the same standard as the other guys. Well, we know these guys are, so it's wide open. And for me, that was the allure of tournaments in the first place. I remember buying UFC 3 on VHS, and the picture on the front of that box was Ken Shamrock and Hoist Gracie, and I didn't know at the time that fight didn't happen on that show. There was injuries, and Shamrock pulled out, and a policeman won it coming in off the alternate bout. So it's stuff like that you just don't get with regular fights. I think it's good to mix things up every now and again, gets the fans talking. We had a huge response from fighters, because this was open to people who weren't necessarily under contract with Cage Warriors as well. And I think you're going to see in the welterweight tournament that's coming up in September a few unfamiliar faces. So yeah, interesting times. 3 more to go after this one, so it's going to be a fun end to 2024 with all the prize fighters.
Oh, I didn't even know that. Like I was doing a podcast last week and I was like, "There's a prize fight." It just slipped. It just completely got past me for some reason. But yeah, I just to hear there's more of them coming as well. That's absolutely fantastic. And I feel like as well, like MMA fighters are always willing to do things like this because they all believe in themselves and they believe they're going to win. But sometimes it's not always possible to put them together, and I know there's injuries and stuff as well, so all the best laid plans of mice and men, as they say, but it's great to see like all the good fighters being kind of thrown in together. Let's start with Martinoni and Giordano, as you mentioned there. I suppose it's been an interesting few years for Martinoni. Obviously he went in there against Dominic Wooding, when Wooding kind of put his whole career on the line basically in that fight, and Martinoni, and not that he took it away from him, but he took the fight away from him, and he took the belt away from him, and then to release the belt, go down away classes, end up losing, I suppose, and he won his last fight, so this is a great opportunity, I suppose, for him to kind of get back into that mix, I suppose, win this big prize and go back. And as we know that the people listening to this probably know at this stage, the interim title fight is off after the initial title fight had been off with Shad Shaq, and also if he wins this tournament, it's hard to say he's not the number one contender. Obviously Nicholas Blandi to be tough on him, but on the other side of it, then Giordano lost a couple of fights in Cage Warriors, came back and beat Sam Kelly last time out after having a great run of 6 in a row before that as well. He's a big hitter, Brad, 5 knockouts out of 7 wins, and for Martinoni, it's a very, very interesting time in his career, because once you get to that top, if you don't get back there again at this stage of your career, it could turn into anything, really, couldn't it? So this is a massive fight for both of these guys.
Yeah, absolutely. So a couple of things on this as well. The winner of this tournament gets a title shot. The winner will fight. These are bantamweights as well. So the winner will fight Liam Gittins for the bantamweight title at some point in the sort of the back end of the year. Obviously, we're going back to Manchester in September, so if they're ready, it would obviously make a whole lot of sense to do there, but we'll see. But yeah, whoever wins this gets that title shot, and this is what makes like Martignoni's inclusion so interesting for me. Like, he's on an absolute tear at bantamweight. He relinquished the title, lost on points at flyweight. He's too big for flyweight these days. You could tell just by looking at him at the weigh-ins and during the fight. Just didn't have anything in him. Still managed to go 5 rounds with Shad, which is incredible, but just didn't have that same zip that he has at 135. Now he moves back to 135, gets a nice knockout in his return to the division. He could have walked into a title shot straight away, but he really fancied this. He was like, he looked at the field and thought, I could do with $50,000 for a night's work, and I reckon I can do it. So again, he's risking it all here. Giordano, I would say maybe the bookmakers outsider in the tournament, but incredibly durable. He got Nathan Fletcher on his Cage Warriors debut, which to me just speaks how highly Ian Dean regarded him to put him in there with a guy like Nathan straight off the bat. He had a couple of tough fights. Big knockout against Sam Kelly in that bloodbath. Like, this guy is game. He will go and go and go. He'll stand in front of Martignoni and he'll trade with him. And, obviously those guys will have wanted to be straight in the tournament. But the first thing out of both of their mouths when we talked to them afterwards were, this is going to decide who the best unsigned bantamweight in Italy is. Like, these guys are up for it. And I can't wait. It's going to be a tear up. The
other fight I wanted to talk about is very interesting. Obviously, we'll talk about both of the tournament fights, but Maia and Shirzad Quadrian, obviously it's a rematch. Went back and watched their fight yesterday, and to say Maia dominated it would be maybe a stretch, but he did obviously very well in that fight, landed a lot of leg kicks. But the one thing I would say, right, when you're looking at a rematch, you look and see, okay, one guy won it well enough, but does the other guy have a chance? And the way that Quadrian, and I'm probably butchering his name there, but he kept getting in on takedown after takedown after takedown. Now, he ended up getting a couple late in the third round, which again probably gives him a little bit of heart coming in here, but the fact he got in on so many takedowns, got through with him, like, and it's easier said than done, especially easy for me sitting here, but like little bits of adjustments, maybe little trips, maybe moving to little body locks and stuff could turn this fight around very, very quickly. And especially like we all know, you know, cup games take on a life of themselves, and you know sometimes these turn into that. It's an interesting rematch coming in based on the first one, isn't it? Because it's not one of those fights you look back on. If you're to look back on the fight and they weren't rematching, you go, okay, one guy kind of won handy enough. But when they are rematching, you're looking like what adjustments could be made, and they're honestly, it's not one of those fights where it takes a lot of adjustment to make that a more even fight.
Yeah, I think both these guys were actually really chuffed that this one's being run back. You know, Shearzad's obviously got to be in his bonnet about the result of the first time. But look, you can't buy experience, right? Shearzad's only 23 years of age. So it's the youngest guy in the tournament by quite some stretch. And we know Wesley's been around the block, fought many, many tough opponents, fought Jack Shaw on 24 hours notice in Cardiff in a big arena in the main event back in the day. So we know he's a big game player. You know, went and took out Lewis McGrillen in PFL not too long ago. You know, this guy can rise to the occasion. And the thing with Sherzad is he's that age where every time you see him, like he's so young, every time you see him, something's changed. Something's got a little bit better. And he's training with the right guys. You know, he's been out training with Khabib and the guys. You know, this is a guy who's very, very serious about his craft, very serious about where he wants to be. And as you say, you know, you throw in the tournament format as well. Another thing to remember is that the semi-final bouts are only 2 rounds and there's no elbows. So if he wants to empty the tank a little bit early, get those early takedowns and use his grappling to just keep Wesley off his feet and, you know, just do enough to get through and still be damage free in the final, you know, that could be an interesting tactic for Sherzad. I think Wesley, we've seen his grappling improve as well. We've seen him looking for takedowns and ground and pound. So really interesting rematch. And I'm going into this one not thinking that I know how it's going to go just because I've seen it before, because I think Sherzad has got better since that time, and I think Wesley has as well.
Another thing is it's going to be very interesting to see how lads approach this. Like a guy like Wesley Maya, we've often seen him going out there and go balls to the wall very, very quickly. Like it's funny because you're like, it's 2 rounds, so okay, you can go more balls to the wall, but then you know you have a fight later on. Is the finale? What's the finale? Is that 3 rounds or is it 2 rounds?
It's 3. So the format is semi-final 2 rounds plus an overtime if it's a draw.
Okay.
So Ultimate Fighter rules basically, and there'll be no elbows in the semi-finals. Finals is 3 5-minute rounds, full unified rules, and if the fight's a draw, there'll be a sudden death.
Oh, so you could be fighting 6 rounds, 7 rounds.
Yeah.
That's how do you approach that? Like that's very, very difficult. Like because you could approach it. I was like watching some of the PFL tournaments, like Moldavsky, like a guy who had won like as a heavyweight, won like 10 of his 12 fights by a decision. And the first fight he comes out and he knocks someone out because he wants to be, you know, better prepared for the next fight, not to have taken too much damage. You'd wonder if some lads will come out here, right? I need to get the first round finish here to give myself a better chance. Like especially like someone like Wesley Maya. Like I'm looking at his record here. He fought Martinoni before and lost. Like it's funny that he's fought Sherzad and won. I'm sure he'll be wanting to win that fight to get another shot, possibly a Martinoni, you know, if there's an injury there or whatever. I know it's the reserve bout, but there's so many factors that play into this as well. And in this, it's very, very interesting, isn't it? Who like we'll get to the other matchup here in a second, but who would you think like let's say if someone has to go 7 rounds, right? Who would you think that benefits the most?
That's very interesting. I think, you know, you'd want someone who was maybe just by an expert at controlling their opponent, controlling where the fight takes place. So you look at a guy like Sherzad, super young, fit, injury-free as well. But then you've got a guy like Aiden Stephen, who's such a suffocating grappler. He can get you down, he can take you back, and he can keep it for long periods of time. And he's not putting himself in danger of taking damage, of getting himself cut, of getting himself hurt. He can just kind of chip away and chip away. Obviously, Aiden, you know, he came down from 145 one fight ago. He's been waiting for this bantamweight debut that he finally had recently for quite a while now. He looked absolutely fine. It looked like it wasn't an issue in terms of his gas tank, but does that hold up over 7 rounds? And you could say the same for Loof as well. This will be Loof's first time fighting at 135 pounds. He fought at 140 recently on Fight Club Rush. You know, if you're going to pick a tournament fighter, do you go for the guy with 1-shot knockout power like Loof? You know, if he can do a Jack Cartwright and bang 2 guys out in the first round, easy money. but how's he going to hold up at 135 for the first time? So yeah, so many questions.
Very interesting. And let's talk about that fight, because like I remember here probably a year ago, maybe at this stage, the two of us watched or talked about Samuel Bark, and we were like, this guy is this guy is an absolute beast. And look, we know what he went and did after that. Looking here in the record, there's on Sherdog, there's a little green win mark alongside Alexander Loof for Samuel Bark in 2022. Like, it's not that long ago since he beat him. And then, look, he goes in there with Luke Riley. And I don't know where it was that night. I was at some party or some mass or wedding or something, and I didn't see the fight, and I heard everyone talking about it. I was like, I'll get to this fight. And then like the next Thursday or something, I ended up watching it. I was like, oh my God. I watched it back again there yesterday. God, have you said it's the best Cage Warriors fight ever? It's definitely up there, isn't it?
It's got to be up there.
Yeah.
I mean, you're talking about a nailed on top 5, maybe top 3. Yeah. And, I think at that point it's a bit of a coin toss, really. So much fun to watch. I've watched it countless times back. And incredible to call that the atmosphere in the building. Obviously, it was in the northwest of England. Luke Riley's fans had packed the place out. I think Luke had some fans there as well. But it was one of those where it became kind of less about who you were there supporting, and people were just supporting the fight. Like the sound in that building was absolutely insane. This guy's a dangerous man. Like, we did some like data gathering from the guys, and we went to get some quotes and stuff we could use in promotional materials. And, we were kind of saying like, oh, what would you spend the money on, and what are you most looking forward to? And Loof just said, how cool is it to fight 2 guys in one night? And I was like, okay, oh, yeah, this guy knows. This guy knows what he wants to do with his life. He did also say he wants to buy his girlfriend some new chairs, though. So there's that.
I like it. Good. Where's he from? Good to IKEA or just go on it? No problem. It's a very interesting fight, though. Like, as you talked about with Aiden Stephen, like watching him, and we've seen him. Obviously, he was involved in the mix with the Hughes, Vucinic, Charrier mix for the last, I don't know, 5 years now, nearly, it feels like. And he was always the guy there that you felt like, a lot of those guys are going to be moving on maybe to the UFC, and maybe he'll be the guy left over. But as you said, going down in the weight classes now, just watching him back yesterday, he's just such a technical, well-rounded guy, as you said, good on top when he gets to the ground, and, good wrestling and all of that. But, and, he'd probably need that here, obviously, fighting Loof. But on the feet as well, he's well able to take care of himself, and he's a good technical fighter. Whereas Loof at the other side of it, just the switch stance, power, speed, like and I mentioned again the insane fight with Luke Riley. But there's certain guys you watch and you just think like, I fear for their opponent if they get caught by one of these shots. And that's this fight in a nutshell, really, isn't it? Like the control of Stephen versus like the can't control of Loof nearly. And like Loof is better than that as well. He's a good technical fighter at the same time. But like, I know we kind of just touched on it there, but a guy like Loof, like, surely his MO in these first two rounds will be, look, play it safe until an opening comes and then land a big one, because like that could be a real winner in a tournament like this.
Yeah, I mean, if you we touched upon it briefly a minute ago. The Jack Cartwright game plan: just go out there and bide your time, and then clean these guys out as quick as you possibly can. Obviously, what he doesn't want is to give up those takedowns to Aiden, because it takes a long time to get Aiden Stephen off you. It takes an even longer time if he's on your back, and with only 2 rounds, he might not have long enough to make anything work. Look, Aiden is a guy who's really chomping at the bit for this. He wanted to make that drop to bantamweight. He had, I want to say, around a year off, and then he had 2 opponents back to back drop out the fights either the night before or on the day of the fight itself. So I think he was fighting Matt Camilleri, had problems with his weight cut, had to go to hospital overnight before the weigh-ins, and then Dan Dausch got sick after the weigh-ins. So the frustration that's kind of been building up inside of him, he's just become a father as well. So he's a young father, and he's wanting to go out there and progress his career. Obviously had that fight in Scotland, a bit of a homecoming for him, big arena show, kind of got all that frustration out of his system now, and now he's ready to go. He was the first guy with his hand up saying, you know what, got a new kid at home, I could do with that 50 G's, let's do it. So a very, very dangerous man in this tournament.
Looking forward to that tournament, absolutely cannot wait for it. And it's a storyline that I suppose will progress throughout the night. So we'll talk more about it afterwards, and obviously it's going to be very fun. As we mentioned, the interim title fight is off as we record now. Maybe something else will happen, but between the time this comes out and that. And the other one is James Webb. He was supposed to fight Yannick Bahadi, but you were mentioning me before, and there's probably a replacement coming in. As I said, it's all up in the air still at the moment. But just quickly on James, this is a huge fight for him, because like he's lost 3 of his last 4 after kind of going on that good run again. But the one I suppose he's beaten is Paddy McCurry, who's gone over the top at the moment. Could very well be in the UFC, and that's obviously looking like a better and better win all the time, I suppose, even though, tough on Paddy taking it on short notice and everything like that. But for James, it feels like he's always 1 or 2 fights away from a title shot at the same time, especially in that middleweight division. There's always a lot of turnover, but in the middleweight division, I feel like especially. But this is a massive fight for James in his career, isn't it? And back in London again, and he is a guy, and I believe he's up. Is he up at light heavyweight now as well? A new lease on life there. We saw how muscular he's been looking over the last while, and I feel like the one issue with James, I felt like over the last few years, maybe the speed was a bit of an issue, whereas up a weight class it mightn't be as big of an issue. And there's never been a doubt about his strength or his power or anything like that, and his wrestling is very, very good. I like the move to light heavyweight. It's and obviously still very much up in the air, the opponent and everything like that. But for James Webb, Brad, it's good to see him back, and good to see a new lease on life for him.
Yeah, absolutely. Love James. He's a great guy. Love watching him fight. He's got that power. He's got that freakish strength, and he's massive at middleweight. He's one of those guys who's just like naturally big. You look at a guy like Jack Marshman, for example, who incredibly got down to 170 a few times. Just a big, thick dude. So for me, moving up to light heavy at this stage in his career, it's an absolute no-brainer. As we record this, I believe he does have an opponent, just waiting to get those contracts back. So very much looking forward to see him in London. He's always a big crowd favorite there. And look, who's to say, one nice head and arm choke, one nice big right hand or left hand, and we're all of a sudden talking about James Webb running towards the Cage Warriors light heavyweight title. There's a couple of big lads on the roster at the moment who be interesting to see him up against. And I know James has been training up with the kind of super, the heavyweight super team that's sort of up in the UK at the moment, where you've got Aspinall, you've got De Vries, you've got guys like Ben Francis, who's a guy you will be hearing about very, very soon. If he can make heavyweight, he's that huge. He's the guy. If you ever see the pictures of all those big dudes training up north, he's the guy that makes Tom Aspinall look really small. Absolute tank of a man. Called a lot of his amateur fights. He's just turned pro recently. So yeah, keep an eye out for him. But yeah, James is up training with those big dudes. I think Modestus was up there as well. So he's putting himself in that environment where, he's with the absolute best guys in that weight bracket in this part of the world. And that's exactly what you want to see. What you don't want to see from a more veteran guy is just keeping things the same. He's obviously got a great head coach in Chris Fields, who's always going to be under. And obviously Chris, with the unique situation with James anyway, in that he trains in England sometimes, then goes over to KF for his fight camps. So the fact that he's still training with a great team in Team KF, and he's going to get that work in with all those massive dudes as well, I think it speaks volumes to his character. And yeah, I can't wait to see him back.
100%. One big thing about this card as well, for the Irish side of it, there is a good spread on the gyms here, obviously, with James Webb at KF. We'll talk about Matthew Elliott in a second, but for Ger Harris, this is a very interesting fight against Joanne Scott. Like, Harris's last fight at Cage Warriors 170, you just hope he didn't paper over the cracks in that win, because like, got a great win in the end and a great submission, but he got taken down over and over and over, and you would think that would be, you could win and learn in that in that fight possibly. And I'm very interested to see how he looks coming in here. Joanne Scott, it's tough talking about Joanne Scott's Cage Warriors career so far, because he spent the whole fight slipping all over the mat in his last fight. It was one of the most incredible things I've ever seen in my life, and then he goes out and he gets the win anyway. But he is very attacking, a bit green still, obviously. I think Jared probably is a little bit as well. They're both very young in their career. I think for Scott, if he can start cutting off the cage a little bit better, he is very accurate with his shots and he throws them very well. Throws that big high flying knee as well. Very good slams, good on the ground too. Goes for subs very, very quickly. This is an interesting fight. You think like if it turns into a technical matchup, you think Jura would have the better of it. If it turns into a bit of madness, you think Scott would be the favorite here. I find this one very, very, very hard to call, Brad. It's an Ian Dean special again, isn't it? Two of the best up-and-coming prospects thrown in together, and one will emerge. You must be looking forward to this one.
Yeah, I really am. I'm a massive fan of both these guys. I've been a big fan of Jawani's for a long time, like going back to his amateur days. I remember him beating Lonnie Kavanagh back in the day, and he had a fantastic run as an amateur. Took a bit of a break from the sport, and I was lucky enough to call his comeback fight in Cyprus a couple of years ago randomly. Nice surprise to see him on that card and catch up with him. So great for him then to end up back on Cage Warriors with us. I know Ian Dean also is someone who's been a big cheerleader of his for a long time. So it's great to have him back. And yeah, that weird situation with his last fight, sliding all over the place. So if you don't know and you haven't seen it, check it out. It was a real puzzler for us at the time.
No one else was sliding all over the place. Like, it was just him. It was so weird.
Well, it was the first fight of the night, so we were panicking, thinking, "Oh my God, there's something wrong with the cage." But then after a few minutes, you're like, "Actually, it's only him that's sliding. The opponent's not sliding." And then obviously the next fight, but it turns out that his feet were actually too dry. So they put water on his feet between rounds, and he was absolutely fine. He just had really dry skin on his feet. So yeah, I think he's going to moisturize next time before he comes out.
And it really affected him. Like, it was ridiculous. Like,
it was crazy. But look, the fact that he could remain composed under that and then still come out and put on that cracking performance, again, speaks volumes. A very experienced guy. He's been fighting for the best part of a decade in MMA, and I believe he's done a bit of boxing as well. And then Joe Harris is, again, just a great guy to be around. He's got all those qualities where you can be like, yeah, this kid is going to kill it on Tough next year or the year after. All it's going to take is one interview with this guy. He's got that charisma. He's very likable. Fantastic story with your boys on the old triangle of him stealing the baby in Thailand.
And Garner
you should probably check that one out for context, not just take it at face value.
Although that kind of is the context.
That is actually what happened. No, it's a lovely kid. Always incredibly well supported. I think he's got a bunch of fans coming over from Ireland for this one. So looking forward to them making some noise in the Indigo. Yeah, really talented. Gregory Wamitan, who fought last time, guy, you can't just look at the MMA record. This is a guy with years and years and years of grappling, judo. So you can understand him getting the takedowns. But again, for young Mr. Harris to be able to stay composed and come out on top, I think he's got a bright future in this sport. I think both these guys do, and it's incredible that we're getting to see them matched up at this point in their careers. And
100%.
Another win after this one, wouldn't be surprised to see either fighting for the title.
100%, very, very close to it. Luca Miranda and Matthew Elliott is one fight I want to touch on as well. Very much look at a striker versus a wrestler here. Although Matthew Elliott, going back watching his last fight, he looked way more composed and looked a lot better on the feet than I've seen him before. But look, we know what he is. He's as strong as an ox. When he gets you to the ground, very, very good. Obviously, we saw what his fight against Shelley a few years ago. Maybe there wasn't enough ground and pound there. I think that's something he's definitely adjusted in his game, and he's better at that. But Miranda, a very attacking southpaw, which is always tough to deal with. And he has the advantage, and it's a weird thing, I see this with fighters often, he has the advantage of knowing that everyone's going to want to take him down because he's such a good striker. So it's always in the game plan. He's good in the transitions, often lands on top from takedown attempts, and is a devastating ground and pound artist as well. This is a very interesting fight, and you would think the wrestler would have the advantage over the striker, but it's going to be tough. Now, Matthew Elliott's probably a better wrestler than what Miranda's faced so far. You could argue, but it's an interesting one. Matthew Elliott's a funny one, Brad. Because every time it feels like I've seen him fight 10 times, but he's still only 3-1. And he feels like he definitely has more experience. You would put it with his opponents than that 3-1. But he's a guy as well at featherweight. He could climb the ranks very, very quickly here, and you could see him going on a good run of wins if he gets over Miranda, which is no easy feat at all.
Yeah, I mean, Matt's obviously had amateur fights as well, and he had he's on the Octagon reality show, so
Yes.
that's obviously taking a bit of his time.
Mhm.
I think the thing with Matt is when someone's so good at one thing, it's always a nice surprise when you see that game rounding out, and I think that's what we're starting to see now with Matt, because it would be very easy for him, especially at a certain level, to just rely on that wrestling. And I think one of the most obviously, he was not happy about the result of the Shelley fight. Um, and you can argue that one until the cows come home. But one thing I remember him saying in an interview, I don't know if it was soon after or maybe just after, before his next Cage Warriors fight, he sort of said that he learned the lesson from that and he knows what he has to do now. He knows he has to be more active. He knows he has to be more attacking. And that's the perfect response, because I think it'd be very easy for someone in that situation to be like, no, you know what? The judges got it wrong. I thought I should have won that. Why should I change anything? When the correct response is to, what do I need to do to make sure that never happens again? And I think that's what we've seen with Matt. So very excited to see this, the continued evolution of him. And look, Barando, kind of in a similar position, but the opposite skill set. I love these striker versus grappler matchups. We've got a great one the week after in Manchester for the middleweight title. I think it's just that old school MMA guy in me. I just love seeing who wins the chess match. Can you get the takedown? Can you keep him down, or is he going to get cracked on the way in? I think that's the jeopardy in these kind of style versus style fights. But when you're talking about two young prospects who are still evolving, it could go any way, really.
100%. Brad, I've taken up enough of your time, but just the last kind of run through it. Emer Darcy's on this card as well, a very, very good Irish prospect. Obviously, we've Ryan Shelley against Nick Bagley, which...
That's my favourite fight of the card, man.
That's
my favourite fight of the card, Shelley versus Bagley right there.
A word on that was, we've seen, I went back and watched Bagley, and you forget how good of a wrestler he is at times as well. We all know, he can punch and he can hit hard, but, Ryan Shelley to come back in his last fight and to win that after a couple of losses, that took a lot. And, we've seen what his brother has done, who's fighting the week after, I believe, as well. And I guarantee you he took heart from that and is looking to go forward. But that's a very interesting fight. And I love the Milada Hadi versus Thomas Paul fight on this as well. Jamie Richardson back. There's a few interesting ones. But go on to a word on that Shelley versus Bagley fight before we go, if that's your favourite one. That could go anyway.
This is one of those ones where, and I feel I'd be justified in doing so because we've got so many fights in this card. I'd like to just take a fight off. If Graham said to me, I haven't bought you a birthday present in the 15 years that I've known you, but you can have one fight off to just watch. That's not true. He gave me some close ones.
Me too. Look, they're up there. There you go.
If he says to me, look, you can pick one fight to just sit and watch, Shelley versus Bagley would be the one from this card that I would love to just sit and watch. Big fan of both guys, very entertaining styles. I don't see how this could not be an enjoyable fight to watch.
100%. This card is a banger. I absolutely can't wait for it. I think the added impetus with the tournament as well is going to be absolutely fascinating, and I'm looking forward to tuning in. UFC Fight Pass all around the world, July 28th. Cage Warriors 174. Brad will be on the call on the night. Who's going to be on the call with you?
That's a good question. It's either Mr. Redmond or Mr. Strauss. I know I've got one of them from Manchester and one of them from London.
Really?
I can't remember which at the moment in time, but
it'll be grand. One of them. All right, we'll leave it there. Thank you very much, Brad, and thank you very much for everyone for tuning in. We'll see you all next time.